After proving its strength against China, Japan now faced a far greater challenge. Russia's expansion into Manchuria and the Far East threatened everything Japan had achieved. Two rising empires, one region, and no room for compromise. In February 1904, diplomacy collapsed and war began. This was not just a regional conflict, but a turning point in world history. As the war continued, British and Japanese intelligence cooperated and began working jointly against Russia. Throughout the war, British stations in Malaya and China listened to Russian radio communications and shared them with the Japanese. After the naval battles, on May 1, 1904, the Japanese army launched a land offensive using the Korean peninsula and fought its first major land battle at Yalu. Russian forces heading to assist the Russian Navy by land were subjected to a sudden attack by the Japanese army. As a result of the battles fought, Russian forces suffered a heavy defeat and were pushed back toward Port Arthur. Later, one of the largest land battles took place in the Mukden region of Manchuria. The battle began on February 20, 1905, with the participation of a total of 650,000 soldiers from both sides. After days of fierce fighting, as the flanks of the Russian front collapsed, the army began to retreat. Although Russian commanders initiated a general retreat upon realizing that they were about to be encircled, they could not avoid suffering heavy losses. After 3 weeks of fighting, the Russians decided to completely withdraw from southern Manchuria, while the Russian army lost 90,000 soldiers in these clashes. Although the Battle of Mukden was the most decisive land battle ever fought by the Japanese, final victory still depended on the Navy. The Russians, who wanted to win the war at sea, decided to dispatch the Baltic fleet to Port Arthur as reinforcement. When the fleet arrived off the coast of China after a 4-week journey, Port Arthur had already fallen. Now Admiral Rozhestvensky's only hope was to reach Vladivostok harbor. However, since ships at that time used coal as fuel, the fleet's coal reserves had been greatly depleted. The closest possible route passed through the Tsushima Strait. Although this was very dangerous because it passed between the Japanese main islands and Japanese naval bases in Korea, there was no other choice. Admiral Togo, after the fall of Port Arthur, understood that the Russian Navy would try to reach Vladivostok, the only Russian port in the Far East. The Navy was immediately put on alert and an attack plan against the Russian fleet was prepared. The Japanese launched a sudden attack as the Russian Navy entered the Tsushima Strait on May 27 to 28, 1905. The Russian fleet was almost completely destroyed, losing 8 warships, many small vessels, and more than 5,000 soldiers. After the Battle of Tsushima, the Japanese Navy landed on Sakhalin Island and occupied the southern part of the island. While the defeats of the army and navy shook Russia's confidence, the Russian people began protesting the imperial government. During this period, Tsar Nicholas II decided to withdraw from the Russo-Japanese War in order to concentrate on internal affairs. With the mediation of American President Theodore Roosevelt, a peace treaty was signed on September 5, 1905. Russia recognized Korea as part of Japan's sphere of influence and agreed to evacuate southern Manchuria. It also agreed to transfer to Japan the 25-year lease rights, including the Port Arthur Naval Base and the peninsula. In addition, the southern half of Sakhalin Island also remained with Japan. While this defeat of Russia created a great shock in the West and the Far East, for the first time an Asian country had managed to defeat a European country in a war. With the end of the war, the Japanese turned their direction back to Korea. Korea, which had gained its independence from China with the support previously given, was annexed by the Japanese in 1910. With the outbreak of World War I in Europe in 1914, the British government requested help from the Japanese to neutralize the German Navy in Chinese waters. The Japanese responded positively to this request and declared war on the German Empire on August 23, 1914. The very next day, the Japanese entered China's Shandong province and quickly captured the regions controlled by the Germans by besieging them. In addition, while the Japanese army took part in suppressing counter-rebellions in the British colony in India, it further increased its influence over China. Although the Japanese Empire did not engage much in combat during World War I by supplying the war materials needed by its European allies until the end of the war, it ceased to be a country that borrowed for the first time in its history and became a lending country. Japanese exports increased by exactly 4 times between 1913 and 1918 compared to previous years. Its successes in World War I gave Tokyo a permanent seat in the League of Nations. In addition, in accordance with the decisions taken at the Paris Peace Conference, Germany's rights in Shandong and the Pacific Islands it previously held also came under Japanese sovereignty. With the end of World War I, the prosperity provided by the war did not last, and Japan began borrowing from abroad again a short time after the war. The reason for this was the initially unsuccessful administration of Hirohito, who ascended to the head of the empire in 1926. In order to achieve economic growth again, there was a need for raw materials such as iron, rubber, and oil. Most of these resources were being imported from the United States of America. For this reason, the Japanese set their sights on Manchuria, which possessed many rich resources. In 1931, Japan entered Manchuria, claiming that its soldiers in Korea had been attacked by China. Facing very little resistance, the army quickly occupied Manchuria up to the Russian border and established a puppet state there called Manchukuo. Not content with this, the Japanese began advancing into the interior of China in 1937 by taking advantage of the Civil War. This occupation caused reactions from America and Europe. Especially America decided to stop exporting oil to Japan, citing the occupation of China as justification. Since the Japanese imported 80% of their oil from America, this situation would create a major problem for Japan in the future. Despite these embargoes, while the Japanese continued to advance into the interior of China, World War II broke out in Europe. This war had created a new opportunity for the Japanese. The Japanese Empire, which wanted to be the sole power in Asia and the Pacific region, set its sights on the Pacific Islands dominated by America and European states. However, there was a very large obstacle in front of them, such as the United States of America. The Japanese thought that if they could destroy America's Pacific Fleet, they could easily establish dominance over the Pacific Islands. For this purpose, with the plan made by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, an attack was carried out on the United States Pacific Fleet in Hawaii. In this attack, 4 American ships were sunk, while many ships were damaged to the extent that they became unusable. Although this attack did not fully succeed because the aircraft carriers of the Pacific Fleet were not at the base, Yamamoto continued his plan and launched attacks on regions under the control of Allied forces in the Pacific. He managed to occupy many regions, including Hong Kong, the Malay Peninsula, Singapore, Thailand, French Indochina, Burma, the Philippines, Indonesia, and the Solomon Islands. Following these Japanese successes that shocked the entire world, the United States of America decided to join World War II. By rebuilding their navies as quickly as possible, they began to push the Japanese back one by one from the territories they had occupied. By 1944, the Allies had captured or neutralized most of Japan's bases. The economy and war capability of the Japanese Empire, whose supply chain had become inoperable, began to weaken increasingly. During the very bloody Pacific War, there were very heavy casualties on both sides. Approximately 110,000 Americans, 90,000 British, 4 million Chinese, and 1,750,000 Japanese lost their lives in this war. Meanwhile, I am keeping the Pacific War short because I had previously explained this topic in detail in my video titled World War to Pacific Front. Those who wish can watch this video to gain a detailed understanding. By 1945, the American Army, which had captured all the islands up to the Japanese mainland, now wanted to land on the mainland as well and end the war. The American president of the time, Truman, gave the order to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 in order to end the war more quickly and reduce American casualties. In addition, after the Soviet Union advanced toward the Manchuria region with 1 million soldiers and declared war on Japan, the Japanese Empire was forced to surrender on August 15, 1945. After the war, with the Allied forces occupying Japan and putting the new Japanese constitution into effect in 1947, the 79-year-old Japanese Empire thus collapsed. See you in the next video. For now, goodbye.